Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Sasha and today we are going to talk about all the books I read in March. It's April 10th when I'm recording this, so hopefully I'll get it up before May. That is just my goal, is to get it up the month after it happens. Time is wibbly wobbly and hard to keep up with. Anywho, read a lot of things in March. I am going to basically be reading or referencing directly my blog, where I did post this maybe April 1st or 2nd. My blog gets updated pretty quickly. Hopefully that stays on theme for the rest of the year because I use my blog in my videos, so I have to do the blog first. Anyway, book number 1 for March was Story of My Life by Lucy Score. This is the second Lucy Score book I've ever read. The first one was The Christmas Fix. Had some issues with that book. Not my favorite really, but this was a 5 stars. I loved it so much. It's 514 pages, published in 2025, fiction, contemporary, romance, very funny. I did read this book for a book club I am a part of, and the only thing we really complained about was the length. All the books in this series, because I did go and get book 2 from my library as well, they're all over 500 pages, and for a small town romance, it's kind of a lot of pages. I don't know. I feel like we can still get all of the necessary quirky, yearning, romance, small town, cute things and vibes in 350 to 400 pages. I don't know why we need more than 500. That's my only complaint, really. I had such a fun time with this book. It doesn't take itself too seriously because our main character in book number 1 is in fact a romance writer doing research on small town romance and fake dating and, all the things. All the tropes are pretty much like ticked off box by box. So if you're looking for a really silly romance, but also like it is silly, but there's still some other themes in there that are a little more serious. So that's, I don't know, I'm rambling. This is my first video of the day and I am just remembering how to talk out loud. Book number 2 I read in March was Hungerstone by Kat Dunn. I also need to fidget, so I'm going to use my anxiety beads for the rest of the video. That's why I have them. This was 324 pages, published in 2025, fiction, historical, horror, LGBTQI plus dork. Okay, this book was on my radar for the cover alone. I said this in my library haul, which I'm going to just insert the clip because that will be easier, so sorry editing me, that I'm obsessed with these like book covers that are happening. I really enjoy the covers that are doing this like weird female, just like, you know the covers. I'll try and put more on the screen. And also like the lime green and like the font being drippy and just like everything about this. I'm loving this sort of horror cover that's happening, or that was happening in 2024, 2025. So that's how this book got on my radar. I just saw the cover and I said, yeah, I want to read that. If you have read Carmilla, which is sort of the origin vampire Dracula story except sapphic, this is probably going to be a book you would enjoy. It is very gothic. It is vampires. It is, hating men. It is discovering yourself. It is just so many wonderful things, and I read this book so quickly. I think I read it in one day. Like, once I started, I just needed to know, and I had a really good time with it. So definitely recommend if you like gothic stories and if you like vampire stories specifically, and like not necessarily totally a thriller, but it's out there, okay? It's fun. Up next is a book I read for a book club I'm part of. It's Rings of Fate by Melissa de la Cruz. This is 410 pages, published in 2026, fiction, fantasy, romance, funny, adventurous. I read Melissa de la Cruz's Blue Bloods vampire series when I was in high school. I still have all the books. They're over on what I consider like my kids' bookshelf and also my college textbook bookshelf, because that's where I keep all of the books I was reading in high school and middle school and then college. This was Melissa de la Cruz's first, I was going to say swim, I was just listening to BTS. This is her first dive into adult fantasy novels, and a lot of the critiques during book club was that it read still like a YA. I don't know that I agree or disagree, but I didn't care, I think is where I land. I had so much fun with this book. This is another fantasy romance that is funny. And I just really enjoyed the way a lot of the typical fantasy romance tropes were sort of tipped on their heads a little bit, where we have a barmaid and a prince, and in many instances, the barmaid is saving the prince, even though he's like super powerful and all of these things. So I really enjoyed the way that this novel sort of toyed with and was satirical and funny about fantasy tropes and like romance and things like that. But a critique from people in the book club is that they couldn't tell if it was trying to be funny or if it was just cringy. I thought it was very funny, and I think maybe because I've read this author before, I was able to pick up on that. I don't know. I liked it. A lot of other people didn't. Take that with a grain of salt, I guess. The next book I read in March was for my book club You Can Read With Us. We read Go Luck Yourself. It was an audiobook that I listened to, which I completely recommend. We'll talk about it in a minute. It was 10 hours, 32 minutes. Published in 2025, fiction, fantasy, LGBTQ, romance, funny, and book 2 in a series. We did read The Nightmare Before Christmas for December. Very interesting mix here, because if you liked Nightmare Before Christmas, you didn't like Go Luck Yourself. But if you were like, Nightmare Before Christmas was okay, you loved Go Luck Yourself. And I was in that second category where I was like, yeah, Nightmare Before Christmas was fine. Like, you know, I love Halloween, and I just felt like they didn't get maybe enough representation, or it wasn't what I was expecting. So I think my expectations going into it screwed me up. But Go Luck Yourself, specifically the audiobook, 100 out of 10. Like, I said in this 10,000 out of 10 for the audiobook in my written review. So wonderful. There is a Scottish character because, or maybe Irish. I'm already messing this up. Regardless, it's one of those accents, and it was fantastic. And I just some of the tropes in this were different from the ones we had in book 1, and I liked those tropes better. So I really think it's just gonna depend, and I do think you should read both. So, had such a good time with it. Will be continuing with this series and seeing which characters are next in book 3. Up next, you guys have no idea how excited I am, not only to talk about this book, but the fact that I have been able to read it. Okay? It's A Pack for Spring by Amelia Emerson, one of my favorite authors. I, on this channel specifically, and also when I had my TikTok, and an Omegaverse girly through and through. I have made multiple Omegaverse videos at this point, specifically Amelia Emerson videos, not specifically just Omegaverse in general. Like, oh my god, I'm so obsessed. Let's talk about it though. So before I get started, thank you so much to NetGalley and the publishing marketing team and the author for delivering me an e-arc so I could read this early, because this is 336 pages. The expected publication date is 4 days from now on April 14th, 2026. It's fiction, fantasy, romance, LGBTQIA+, and Omegaverse. This book, you guys, it's technically book 3 in a standalone series, and I did get some props, okay, to help us out. So I do have a pack for autumn and a pack for winter. This was book 1, this is book 2. Pack for spring is book 3. You could jump into a pack for spring, but we do have appearances with these characters in book 3, and so you'll miss some context, but I don't think it's unreadable. Like, there's not major spoilers really if you just jump into a pack for spring. We also have this year, coming up soon, a pack for summer, and I will be talking about that very soon in a video. So stay tuned for that if you're excited. I loved this book. It was wonderful, and I do have a full-length written review available on my blog, and I will also be doing a video review after this video if you just want to watch the video version to get some insight on why it was so good. Up next in March, I did read Game Changer, the physical copy, because if you'll remember, I tried to do the audiobook, I think in February, and said, what the hell is this? And stopped at chapter 5. So I did pick up a physical copy from my library. It was 366 pages, published in 2018. Fiction, sports, romance, LGBTQI+. This book is Scott and Kip's story. So if you have seen Heated Rivalry, the show, or if you have read books in the series, you will know that Scott and Kip get episode 3 and little cameos throughout the show series itself. It was fascinating to actually read book 1, because this is technically book 1 in the Heated Rivalry series. It was fascinating to read book 1 after having watched the show, because there were certain moments or plot points that were a little bit different in the book. And it was really interesting to see where the show deviated and how it worked or didn't work. I think everything worked. I think the show worked so well as the show, as a cohesive story, and I think books 1 and 2, physically reading them, also work perfectly well in the, I guess, book universe. I don't know what we're calling it. If you like queer romances, specifically gay romances, sports romance, this series is for you. I don't know what to tell you. I'm gonna try and read book 3 in April this month, so gotta pick it up from the library, but I'm on it. Up next, I read another fantasy book. It was Fallen Gods by Rachel Van Dyken. This book is 400 pages, published in 2025, fiction, fantasy, romance, adventurous, mysterious. I'm so obsessed with this cover. This was another one where I was like, cover, gotta read it. I didn't even really look into it. I was just like, yep, that's gonna be for me. This takes a very interesting turn because it's based on sort of Norse mythology and the characters Odin, Loki, Thor, all those guys and gals that we know maybe from Marvel or from other franchises, or if you just really know Norse mythology in general. The last Norse mythology thing I read, I think, was Danielle L. Jensen's series, A Curse of something, you know, with the blonde on the cover, again, editing me, so sorry, you have to do more work. So that was sort of the context I was coming into this from once I realized what sort of fantasy we were getting. It was so interesting because, number one, it takes place over the span of a week. 7 days exactly. And that was fascinating because I feel like most fantasy books can take place over years in one book. And this was 7 days. So you really got a detailed look into each character's sort of minutia of their daily lives. And I thought that was fascinating. So interesting that it's 7 days for 400 pages. The second thing that's interesting is that this is set basically in like 2026 college. Like, the kids are on TikTok, the kids are doing kid things. I mean, they're kids to me, but like they were all over 18 and they're in college, right? So having all of these characters who are these fantastical mythical gods be college students, and like on TikTok it was crazy to read something like that, and I just thought it was so unique and I really enjoyed it. And I don't know how else to recommend it, because this is another one. It reminded me a little bit of Rings of Fate in the fact that it could almost read as a young adult. But I think for this specifically, it's because it's book one in a series that's why it's maybe reading that way. I think as the series progresses, that will change. I don't know. We'll see. Up next, I read a book for a book club I'm a part of, Best Offer Wins. This was 273 pages, published 2025, fiction, thriller, dark, tense, fast-paced. This was a pretty fast-paced read. This was something I voted on because I really wanted to read it. And on paper, the concept is totally something I would like. I think the problem I ran into is that every character was extremely unlikable. And it's hard for me as a reader, and this was a discussion we had at book club. I personally think it's hard for me as a reader to really enjoy a story if there is almost zero relatability to the character in any way. And that's not to say like it's an Asian character, it's a black character, it's an like person of color character, it's a queer character. I'm not saying like that's not relatable to me, because obviously I love Game Changer and I'm neither a man nor gay and have never played hockey. So like that's not what I mean. I just mean on a personal level. Like if there's not a single thing I can connect with or root for, if I just think like you're a really gross person. Another example I might use is the character Dexter. On paper, no one's gonna be like rooting for a serial killer, but because of Dexter's personality, because of his morals and ethos, like more people support Dexter than don't support Dexter. And this was not that type of character. I did not like them. I did not really enjoy the way the book unfolded. Like we talked so much at the book club about all the different ways this could have gone and the ways we would have preferred things to go and like ways that it could have been more exciting. And so this one maybe wasn't for me, but it is making the rounds through all of the really popular like celebrity book clubs and everything. So I'm sure you've heard of it or will be reading it, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it, because most of my book club loved this book, and there were 3 of us, I think, who gave it 3 stars. Like, that was the lowest rating it got in the book club. Up next, another sort of St. Patrick's Day themed book was Lucky Day by Chuck Tingle. I did finally read my first Chuck Tingle book. I'm so happy about that. It was 228 pages, published in 2025. Fiction, horror, LGBTQIA+, dark, reflective, tense. This is one of my weird book picks for the month because I'm trying to get into more weird horror so that I'm not just reading I'm not just reading fantasy and romance, because I've been getting bored reading the same things over and over and over. So this was crazy. This was so fun. This was wildly gory and depressing, and an incredible read if you just feel not great about the state of the world in 2025 and 2026, because that is really encapsulated in this main character and the way that they become so apathetic to just everything. They're alive, but they're not living anymore for a good portion of this book, and I find that so relatable. And so this character, even though it's like I would not have made these same decisions, I could so easily see myself in them if like my life had taken a different turn, or like if I was a different person. Like, you know, this was so fascinating, and One of the things I said on my blog is I have never been so thankful for access to prescribed antidepressants as I was when I was reading this book, because I could so easily see myself in the main character. Their apathy in the face of such horror, trauma, and tragedy struck a deep chord within me. I was here for the ride and just as creeped out to learn more about what led up to that tragic day. Amazing. I couldn't have guessed what was going to happen, and I just loved it. Up next is another weird, creepy book. It's Bat Eater and Other Names for Cora Jung, or Jang, or not sure how to pronounce her last name. It was 298 pages, published in 2025, fiction, horror, thriller, dark, emotional. I have read one other book by Kylie Lee Baker in the past, and I did enjoy that book, and I'm gonna keep reading this author because I think they are incredible now. This book took all of my deepest, darkest fears and wrapped them up in paper and put them out into the world for me to read. It took me more than 2 months to read this book because I could only read a little bit at a time because I kept getting so scared. This book is set during the COVID times, during the Panini, and that is a huge, not just catalyst and setting, but just important topic in the book. This book discusses racism, and specifically against Asian people, Chinese people, but of course, if you looked Asian even a little bit, if you looked Chinese, you were going to have comments made to you, and sometimes worse, during 2020. So this book tackles that in a super dark, fascinating way. And there are ghosts in this book, and that was honestly probably, it's like the horror element of this book really was like the pandemic and not knowing what COVID would do to you, and that fear around like there's this virus and people are dying, and it just put me immediately back into like March of 2020 and that was a very scary feeling. And then on top of that, now obviously this isn't something I can personally relate to because I am not Asian, but on top of that, the fear of leaving your house when specifically there's a serial killer targeting Asian women in this book. And scary, gory, gross. Wow. Wow. I gave it 5 stars. Alright friends, that's everything I read in March. I did not end up DNFing anything. Everything I started I finished, which I think means I'm on the right track of figuring out what I'm enjoying reading, or at the very least finishing something for a book club, or also just finishing it to see what happens and not being like, this is a 2 or a 1 star and I don't want to finish it. Like, everything was a 3 or higher this month. So yeah, that was very fun. I hope you enjoyed my March reading wrap up. Stay tuned, I have a lot of bookish content I'm going to be filming today. I have had a lot of ideas, a lot of things I want to post, and I hope you enjoy them. Thanks for being here, thanks for watching, I'll see you next time. Bye!